Well, good evening, everybody. I'm John O'Loughlin, and welcome to my channel. It's called McDuff Lives. And I've been looking forward to this weekend for a long time, and I'm so glad to welcome my colleagues and friends to the show tonight. And up in Massachusetts, we have Mark Kulaks with Housatonic ITS. And over in Michigan, we have David Underdown joining us. And these two guys have been inspirations to me as somebody who's delving into this business of investigation for the first time seriously into the things that are hard to find. But you guys are the ones that really dig. And of course, there's a lot of others too. But you guys, I just wanted to thank you for all the work that you do. And thank you for being here. And but also, I want to get a little caught up with you a little bit. I'm also going to introduce tonight to the show Garland Nixon. He's here with me over next to me. Say hi. Hi to everybody.
Hello. Great.
Garland, good to see you. Good to meet you. Sort of.
Great. So you guys actually can just talk amongst yourselves if you want. But what I'd like to do first is to start with Mark Kulak, and because Mark, your research is just absolutely dynamite. And so tell me what you've been working on lately. I know you can't bring me fully up to date, but give me some highlights.
Well, thanks for having me on the show. I hope the charrette this year is going great, John. We can have another catch up one-on-one if you want to, but this is a real treat to be here with the team. Well, just diving right into it. You know, we've combined dives on history, trying to document and discover what hasn't been written or has potentially been deleted. And it's not, as I probably have said this so many times, to win Trivial Pursuit, so that we understand where the hell we are and where we're going and how we can make, better decisions as a community, as a family, and so on. A lot of the research, to no surprise, being with the COVID-19 pandemic being the front and center of everything, has just come down to the history of genetics, the history of, a book I just got today is from 1994 called The Gene Wars. And at some point in the last really 30-something years, all of the traditional concerns or methods of military conflict, while military conflict still exists, and civilians are still getting killed by drone strikes. I don't mean to minimize it, but this view that we had of thermonuclear warfare is just not going to happen. And what sort of slipped in is a of science and a race to be to map out the human gene first and to have mastery over it. And there's multiple parties involved in it, and a lot of what has been behind my hypothesis, this current pandemic, is the push to get the next generation of medicine out there. We know in 2016, just before Trump took office, there was a new an act called the Cures Act, where they
Oh, we're losing audio.
given emergency authorization, and this new generation of medicine, genetic therapy, which doesn't mean gene editing, was probably 10, 20, 30 years of research, but now there you have it. 60% of the U.S. population has taken it, and most people are okay. Most people are okay. Most people who take it are going to be okay. Okay. That's really what a lot of this is about, and all of the national security and scientific and economic implications of this, spiritual. And believe it or not, this actually traces back to World War II, because a lot of the experimentation regarding genetics started off as testing people, oftentimes non-consensually, to radiation exposure to see what it was doing to their genetic makeup. This research goes in many directions, but to boil it down, this is the big story. It's a big part of human evolution. I'm not even necessarily against it. I just wish it was more transparent so that we could participate in it in a more intelligent and ethical and above board way. And anyways, simply put, I could talk for hours about it, and I have, but the big story reduced is that's where I've been going. That's the research, and that's what things seem to button up as.
Well, I'll tell you what. Let's ask Garland Nixon if he has any questions for you about what you just talked about. Have you been following this kind of a massive attempt to change the genome?
Well, two things that I do recall, because I read constantly. One of the things I recall is reading a number of stories about a U.S. military laboratory, and they were working on, allegedly, supposedly, they were working on some kind of a biological weapon that could be aimed at a particular group. For instance, you want this biological weapon to just go after the Russians or do whatever it is, right? Mm-hmm. And that there was great concern over that. And so I guess, have you looked into any of the issue of using these genetic medical adaptations from the perspective of biological weapons?
Oh, yes. And the number of laboratories around the world is shocking. Whether or not there's been any success at tailoring something to go after a particular race, let's just say, looking at other type of biogenetic markers, it's not clear. A lot of progress has been made, but the number of labs, there's a lot of focus now in this Wuhan Virology Laboratory, but there's, through the DTRA, Defense Threat Reduction Agency, there's about 15 or 20 additional labs around the world. Big one is in Georgia. They're almost built like a wall around Russia and China, and then the National Institutes of Health goes on and outsources more work into China. It's crazy, and of course, there's a lot done within the United States as well, and it does involve military. It does involve Department of Homeland Security, Department of Agriculture. So there's interest in big pharma. There's interest in military. There's, but there were groups. There was a particular, how would you say, a security council that was created in the 1980s under Reagan, called the Future Security Working Group, of which Andrew Marshall, Office of Net Assessment, Henry Kissinger, and Al Wolstetter were the lead people on, and sitting side by side next to Henry Kissinger was a fellow named Dr. Joshua Lederberg, who is almost like the top dog in history with respect to reverse transcription, the ability for viruses to make genetic modifications. And theoretically, the national security concerns about being able to modify target genetic groups or enhance one's own genetics, or how would you say, de-emphasize another nation, is bigger than any missile, any bomb, any tank, any copter. So this has been present silently. We pass it off as, oh, they're worried about cancer. Oh, we're worried about whatever, developing nations. There's always a sob story behind it. Which are good, but the reality is that it's just about getting money into this research. And well, here we are, COVID-19, and the connections to military are shocking. Again, I'm not saying that there's no military options in the world. You cover some amazing stuff, Garland, and everything that you say is, as far as I'm concerned, on the money with respect to Middle East conflict. But those are as many lives are still lost there. That's still a relatively, I think, well, anyways, you know what I'm trying to say with that. It's that's more traditional warfare, which is being replaced with more and more, as you see with drones technology and potentially biological warfare implications in the future.
Well, great, and that was very interesting. There's so much to this. When you get to Mark's YouTube channel, Housatonic Live, you'll be able to learn this material in depth, because Mark really does dig into it, and you can bet he's done the homework to say what he said tonight. Now let's bring David Underdown into our conversation, and let's ask you the same question, Dave. You are one of the most constant researchers I know. I see you putting up post after post on Twitter, for example. But also, you've done some real deep dives into America's corporate history and the oligarchical families that have been involved in it from the beginning. Tell us what you've been working on lately, David, and thanks for being here tonight.
Well, thanks for having me. I always feel like my role is to try to link everybody's stories together, almost like the point guard on the basketball team. And, sometimes I can, tell my own personal history, which has a lot of, really connections that are hard because they relate to, John's family. And, there's a lot of stuff with my family that I just never, they were all gone before I knew them. So, the stories I heard were, they were smokers and they, had bad lifestyle choices, or they were, had illnesses and, cancers and various things. So I always, thought of my family as, something that, not to dig into, was always kind of pushed away. So, with relating to John's stuff, I mean, his personal story is similar to my dad's. My dad went to college. He went to Colorado State, and he followed his high school girlfriend out there. And, his mom got cancer and died. And, he dropped out of school and, had all these problems and came back to Michigan, and his girlfriend dropped out. And, that was never really talked about. So, and with the connections to that stuff, again, like, I didn't know Detroit was the parallel of Goki, Russia. It's the arsenal of the world. I mean, for World War II, that was where the United States made their war material, was in Detroit, and they ran a parallel program with Russia, and it was done through a man named Albert Kahn, who was the builder for Ford and for Chrysler and all over. And he was from Detroit, and he did Willow Run and all these places we've visited. And he's done a lot of buildings, like at the University of Michigan, which George just started talking about a little bit. And McDuff, of course, has his year spent there. Because my dad's side of the family has deep University of Michigan ties, like going back generationally. And so, thinking about this stuff, it's hard because, again, it's like, they were, he had a heart attack and died, or, he got run over changing his tire, or whatever. And, but the reality is like my dad's mom's side, they were doctors from the University of Michigan, and going back to, like, her brother, her dad, and her grandfather, all were University of Michigan medical school degree people. And like my great grandpa was did his residency at Case Western, which, if people know about the Rockefellers and the history of Standard Oil, that, it was Standard Oil, Indiana, but that was really Gary, Indiana. It's really Chicago. And then you had the Standard Oil Company of Ohio, which was Cleveland and Cincinnati. And, all these old Rockefeller connections are a lot in Ohio and with Columbus. And we see it now with the Wexner and the Jeff Epstein stuff, but it goes way back. It goes to World War I. It goes back to Sam Bush and to E.H. Harriman, and it goes back to William Rockefeller. And these guys were all from Ohio, and they all went to Yale together, and they were all skull and bones guys together. And then they all ended up starting banks, either Brown Brothers Harriman or the Union Bank, or, the Rockefellers got in with the Schneiders, who was, Gerhard Schneider was the chancellor of Germany before Angela Merkel. He's the CEO of Rosneft, right? The Russian state energy company. He's on the Nord Stream 2 board. He's a Rothschild energy agent. so again, you know, you can tie it back. I mean, IG Farben's headquarters is on Rothschild property, you know, I mean, it's where they built it. So, you know, you can go back and you can do these ties and, you know, I know everybody, you know, there's a lot of, you know, danger in talking about this stuff if you don't really know it. But the reality is when you get into the, you know, the Harvard stuff with John's dad and the MIT and the Ford Foundation and what they did with our DARPA program and with our weapons programs, and then you go to Yale and their history with Mao's, you know, people don't know Mao Zedong was a Yale China employee. You know, he had a pharmacy in China working for Yale.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, look up Yale China Association. It's all tied in with Flexner because the people that set it up were Henry Stimson, William Taylor Gates, and then Eli Root. And Eli Root's the one that set up the Council on Foreign Relations, right? Council on
Is
Foreign
William
Relations.
Taylor Gates the son of Frederick Taylor Gates?
He's the one that won the Flexner Report. He set up the Rockefeller Foundation. He set up the Rockefeller Hospital. The
Frederick Taylor Gates. Yeah, Frederick. Yeah. Rockefeller liked him very much. They got along pretty well. I understand, anyways, from history books.
Yeah, but you know, you have the Carnegie Foundation is all, you know, that was all the Eli Root that set that up, who did the Council on Foreign Relations. To me, the Council on Foreign Relations is just the rebranding of the East India Company. It was after World War I. They wanted to get rid of colonies and they wanted to get rid of empire. So instead of having an East India Company with its own army, right, its own Five Eyes, it instead turns into the Chatham House and the Council on Foreign Relations. Right. And they instead become foundations. And then you see the legs of it, you know, it becomes the Ford Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, the Carnegie Foundation. Like that's how they finance it all. But they went through, you know, they wanted to get away from the idea of having the Dutch West India Company. Because again, when you get into all this old medical talk, it was all, they wanted the radium first. They discovered X-rays. They wanted to do cancer treatment with radium. Where was the radium? It was Congo. It's the Belgian Congo. Where's the uranium? Same mine. So that was what they wanted, was they wanted to partner through the hospitals and the university system and the foundations. And they wanted to use aid, USAID. You know, that was the first, you know, aid for Congo was the first program that Hoover put in, you know. So it all ties back. And of course, then we had our Sidney Gottlieb overthrow of the Congo for that same uranium, the same radium. Exactly. But if you look at the history of the NIH and Sloan Kettering and all these places there, it's all the mining. They use the medicine as a rinse to either make pills out of petroleum or to gather radium or uranium for X-rays or for cancer treatment. You know, Mark, you've done so much work on the, you know, the way that you know, stuff was rinsed through NASA and through the Atomic Energy Commission, and how that was sort of the way that they had no budget and no oversight and
unlimited budget. Yeah, no budget. They had unlimited budget. I guess you say no restrictions on spending is really what you have to say. Yeah, unlimited confidentiality and unlimited budgets is usually a recipe for disaster. And that is the Atomic Energy Commission. And boy, a lot of not so good things. As you're just, I'm sorry to derail you, but yeah. And I was just highlighting a book while you were talking, Radium: Secrets of Life. About many people use this. We talk about the Huxleys. They like to talk about Huxleys and, you know, Satanism and evil stuff. But the truth was that when they were discovering the properties of radium, they were noticing mutations, and they saw it as potentially a magical material which would allow for the creation or redefinition of life. That's a kind of a big deal. Mm-hmm. And then that was drove a lot of the value to it. And then in addition to the, you know, energy and weaponry concerns. But that's how these crazy topics are related, and it's not in that conspiratorial, salacious way, but there's very real reasons why these things are connected. Not everyone's methods and reasons are necessarily that pure, but if you try to have a little bit more empathy as opposed to comic book type of conspiracies, it actually starts to make a lot of sense. It starts to break down. Plus, we have a great group of researchers who've been working together now for 2, 3, 4 years. That helps a lot too.
Well, Mark, it's great to get back together with you. It's been too long. You were at the very first charrette when we went to Annapolis. We went on the great Baltimore tour that you organized and gave basically like a great tour director. Only it was all about the deep state of Baltimore and all the houses we saw, the port, and everything that tells us, when we were searching, we were really looking into Robert Swan Mueller's father and grandfather at that time, and all of that stuff has continued to pay off. As today, I was watching a new video about the ships at Mallos Bay, right over here in Charles County, and I'm sure, Garland, you know about the ghost ships of Mallos Bay. Well, that's one of the great boondoggles of World War I was the Robert Swan Mueller the first was a purchasing agent of ships, and for the United States Shipping Board. And the United States Shipping Board was run by the big guys like Charles Schwab, right? Is it Schwab or Schwartz? I can't remember which one, but the steel guy. Which one was steel? Schwab, I think. Anyway, he was running this thing because he was the guy that could make the steel ships. But the real money was made by the people that made the wooden ships. Because before the United States got involved in the war, there was a movement to stimulate the growth of the United States merchant fleet. And so they started financing the building of commercial ships. But they weren't state of the art. These were like the old wood technology, and now it's time to go to steel. That didn't stop them. They built hundreds of these big, beautiful wooden ships that were nowhere near as safe, nowhere near as fast, and nowhere near as economical as a steel ship. Well, they spent millions and millions of dollars building these ships all around the country. Hog Island was the great big shipbuilding place. And this resulted in, after the war, they never used these ships in the war. They never had any utility. They sold them to a corporation that was basically a holding company before they decided what to do with them. They parked up, there's 100 and some ships, and they parked them over there on the Virginia shore. But where they parked them, there was people living there that eventually got them to make them move them because the ships would drift and irritate things and cause problems. So they said, move them. Well, they moved them over to Maryland. They put them at this place called Mallos Bay, which is on Charles County's Potomac River shore. And they kept the ships there for a while. They had to pay some rent, and the company that owned them went bankrupt. The bankruptcy disposition ended up in somebody else, and the person that ends up with the ships after the bankruptcy decide, well, we don't need to be paying all this money to keep these ships up. Let's just burn them. So they burned 100 some ships right over there in Mallos Bay, and what they have now is the hulk that just barely extends above the waterline. An aerial photo will show you the outlines of all these ships. It's called the Ghost Ships of Mallos Bay. Wow. And they've made it into an environmental zone, for nature, right? But what it really is the end of millions and millions of dollars of taxpayer money going to the elite people that already owned the shipbuilding facilities of the old state of the art. They made the money. The ships ultimately were sold for only $700,000 for the entire lot of hundreds of these expensive ships. So that's the story of a great boondoggle from World War I that ties right into our investigations at Gibson Island and the Mueller family. And anyway, I'm glad to tell you about that if you didn't know that. Garland Nixon, you're somebody that knows a bit about the water around here, but I wonder what if you have any questions about some of these amazing. I mean, we just covered about 20 of the most important research topics that are going right now between David and Mark. So let me turn it back over to you, Garland, and take it away.
Well, I did have a question, and that is about I see you've been doing that genetic, looking into the issue of I don't know if you call it biowarfare, the research in the genetic medicine. For anyone's watching and is concerned about the mRNA stuff, do you know anything about that, how it works and what it is, or have you done research on this mRNA issue?
Well, it is the how would you say, a light version of the next generation of medicine. And it is about mRNA, messenger RNA. This goes somewhere pretty interesting, by the way. Boy, there's so much involved in this. It requires a much more a real understanding of the human genome, and you're actually working with it very programmatically. The medicine is made synthetically. It is. I'm not really. I think it's not likely that something was used, which is going to cause a high percentage of people to have very bad reactions. I mean, I can't imagine even the most ill-minded people would actually allow something like that to happen. I do have some concerns, nonetheless, though. It's not when we say use the word gene therapy. It is because it is so tuned in, dialed in at the genetic level to your genome, to the DNA in your cells. It can actually, like software, help those cells express themselves, that DNA, and in a particular way. To make new virons, as opposed to a traditional way of how would you say receiving a vaccine where you actually receive a dead version or a live version of it. This mRNA is actually like software, if you will, that causes your body to create the antibodies for this. Or actually creating the virus itself and then creating the antibodies to it. Very different type of technology, and it might be one of the best things ever. It might be. If it is being used now, that would suggest that it's been tested somewhere unknowingly for about 20 or 30 years, which kind of brings you back to the Gulf War and all of the weird issues that they had back then. And by the way, the person who was assigned to oversee Gulf War syndrome was Dr. Joshua Lederberg, who I mentioned before, was always side by side with Kissinger. And remember, Kissinger was a big part of the National Cancer Institute being set up down in was that Fredericksville? I always get the names of the towns.
Fort Detrick.
Yeah, Fort Detrick. He was a big part of that operations. Now, I'm not going to get too deep into it, but did you know that Steve Pieczenik had a brother, Garland?
No.
I didn't know myself until a couple of weeks ago. He has a brother named George Pieczenik, who's 2 years younger, about a year and a half younger. It's Dr. George Pieczenik. I kid you not. Dr. George Pieczenik is a geneticist and a computer scientist at Rutgers. Dr. George Pieczenik's mentor was the creator of mRNA. I mean, the connections and George Pieczenik has been working with a lot of people, a lot of lawsuits he's been filing. I think he's been very active in trying to prevent, unethical patenting of human DNA. I'm still trying to figure out this individual. He played a big part in the early days of writing computer programs to determine how, to read out DNA maps, I guess, if you will, based upon different computer algorithms in the late 1970s and early 1980s. No Wikipedia page for him, which I know as a researcher, you probably have also correlated loosely with something important. And I'm not saying that, again, I think he probably had potentially better intentions than many people. He's been flying under the radar for a while, but he's not just someone who teaches genetics. He is at the Rockefeller University. He has worked with Kissinger, with Alexander Sachs, with Lederberg, with many of the other lead people, Cricks, the top people, Watson of genetic research. So we know that Stephen Buchanek has an inside connections. I didn't know it was a family thing. They're both extremely intelligent individuals, by the way. And Stephen doesn't hide it. He mentions his brother, but he doesn't necessarily flaunt it either. It's interesting. But anyways, I didn't really answer your question specifically. I mean, I'm choosing no on the medicine. But that said, I have a daughter-in-law who is due in a few months right now for my first grandchild. She's being stressed out right now, being pressured by her doctor to take this medicine. And I'm realizing that sometimes you just have to tell people, you know what? You can't go, 100 miles an hour on the conspiracy all the time. Sometimes you just need to put people at peace and say, it's okay. Maybe give some guidance. Hopefully things will be fine. But trying to be, more understanding, more empathetic to all of the pressures that different people receive based upon job or family or whatever. Again, I'm sorry, I'm throwing so much back at you for a simple question.
Well, it was a good question, and
it was a good question.
Yeah, thanks for that, Mark. David Underdown, speaking of families, and as you spoke of your family and with all the cancer deaths, I also had a number of cancer deaths in my family, and that, of course, was one of the big questions in my research was. Given my father's position and where he was and his unwillingness to go along with the narrative, was his early death at 51 by cancer that did metastasize into different organs back in that time. Was that the result of some type of manipulation of him by the Health Alteration Committee of the CIA? And just even to say that name of that committee is pretty creepy. But this stuff does go on, and it does intimidate us. It's been so many years that I've just let my life go by without looking into it because of my family, because I don't want to rock the boat with people. I'd rather just wait. And now, 50 years after he's gone, I've got this amazing support team all around me that's helping me. And David Underdown, you're part of it. So we just need to keep on going. I'm going to wrap up the show pretty soon because it's getting a little dark out here and the mosquitoes are starting to show up. So any final thoughts from you, David, on the issues we've been talking about tonight?
Yeah, just with talking about Bob Mueller and his dad, I always have to bring in my Michigan connection. He was a DuPont. He was a specialty metals man for DuPont, which people forget was General Motors and DuPont were the world's largest corporation in Detroit when they were combined. So the history of General Motors and DuPont is something to look at for everybody. George said a while ago that in War Material, there's the 4 horsemen of metal, and it's DuPont, Vickers, IG Farben, and Noble. And those are the 4 superpowers of mining and of gunpowder and TNT. And people think the Nobel Peace Prize is for peace. It's the TNT nitroglycerin patent. It's for mining. It's a mining patent. So, we've had a lot of history with this stuff, but if you look at the history of General Motors, that it becomes the Sloan Kettering. It was called General Motors Hospital before it was Memorial Sloan Kettering. Charles Kettering was from Flint, Michigan. He ran Duco, I think it was the air conditioning units for Chevrolet. He became the president of GM. Alfred Sloan was he's a very interesting character in George's work because he was working with Jacob Raskob, who was the accountant for DuPont, and Pierre DuPont was also in the mix. Raskob and DuPont both later have the Russian retreat mansions on the Gold Coast. Sorry, DuPont was on the Gold Coast. Raskob's was the one down by you guys in Mystery Island. So this General Motors turning into Sloan Kettering with Fauci in the mix there, with the Reconstruction Finance Committee was Jesse Jesus Jones, who was the Sweet 8F godfather of Houston Oil. He was the Port of Houston guy that started Rice with Jim Baker, who's one of the key characters in the McDuff story, because you've got the Jim Baker and the Schultz connection, going back through history, doing these massive energy deals like end of empire Russia and rebranding the energy of that nation style deals. Like, they're big. And so, just going through and tying Bob Mueller to that, I mean, everybody, he had so much branding of being, the almost the perfect Boy Scout. He was just so good of a, FBI agent. And it's just like, they can't believe a guy that, do-gooder could come along to do this, special counsel. And, Rob Rosenstein was his college intern, at Harvard. So it's all the networks are there. That's why I love working with this group, is because I feel like you get people that really go for the schools and the clubs and the banks and insurance companies and, the missile defense company, and not just, the compromise part, which is part of it, but it's like it's one phase. It can, it's there to get you just totally discredited. So it makes it frustrating because it is historically a really important element. The blackmail honeypot stuff is a lot of the big deals of the world happen based on that stuff. So it is, you got to know it.
Blackmail and honeypots seems to make the world go round sometimes, doesn't it? Well, Garland Nixon, Mark Kulak, and David Kramer Underdown, thanks for helping me celebrate McDuff Memorial Weekend here at Mystery Island. It's not only a pleasure, it's an honor and a privilege to talk to all of you guys, and we're just going to keep on going, aren't we? We're never going to stop this. If I drop the torch, you'll pick it up, and vice versa, because we have to win this. This is the real deal, and we're working together. So Garland, Mark, and David, we're going to call it a night right here. Thanks for being with us, everybody. And tomorrow at this same channel, McDuff Lives, will be starting at 1 p.m. with a live show from 1 to 4 p.m. From the Maryland Veterans Museum, where we'll be having some guests. Andy Craig will be with us, the great author of Presidential Puppetry. He's a historian of Hartford, Connecticut, where my dad grew up. And so he's going to come down here and be with us personally. We're going to have Jim Zobel from the MacArthur Memorial Museum down in Norfolk. He'll be with us by internet. And he'll talk about my dad's time on the USS Nashville with General MacArthur as he was doing his island hopping campaign in the 1943 to 44 part of the war. We'll have Professor Yamamoto will join us and talk about servitors of empire and how does his work on the Asian Americans and being used as servitors, how does that resonate in the case of the Irish American families that came over earlier than the Asians? But like my own family, I think there's a lot of that trying to induce them to be servitors, to go with the narrative that Garland Nixon talks about, and not fight the system, but to just be a part of it, be a good worker bee and make some money. Of course, my dad couldn't do that. Garland Nixon can't do that. David Underdown can't do it. Mark Kulak can't do it. And all the people here at this charrette tonight cannot do that either, because we believe in something a little bit more important: truth, freedom, liberty, and the Constitution of the United States. So with that, I say thanks, Garland, Mark, and David. And thanks, Aaron Adler at Neighborhood News Studio, for our great production once again. Good night, everybody.
Happy birthday, McDuff.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.